Well, today announces our season one wrap up. We'll be coming back season two live with Lisa Hampton, live shows in person. But today we're going to talk about the NBA Draft 2024. Who you got? All right, a lot of people have some mock trials going on out here. I call them the mock trials. They're really mock drafts because ultimately, despite the 78 players chosen for the NBA Combine, they are actually still going to have to get through camp and see what happens with that. But I think from the resources and sources that I have had the opportunity to confer with, particularly those NBA executives, it looks like Stephon Castle might be going number one. It would be great for Stephon Castle to do that because he is a native of Georgia, Lawrenceville, Georgia, and the Atlanta Hawks finally got a number one pick. But there are other names surrounding the first round draft pick for 2024. It is indeed considered one of the weakest NBA draft classes in NBA history. Go figure. But there are some strong contenders in this class to include, but not be limited to, Alex Starr, Stephon Castle, and Isaiah Collier. But what does it look like? Would it be wise for the NBA number one pick to also be a home player, native Georgian, and enjoy the fan base and the support systems that are needed for him to excel? He is indeed representing one of the best to play the game in terms of the NC2A D1 UConn Huskies. He came in as what they at first thought was a three-star pick. He has definitely proven himself to be a great contender in the NBA. He's a great defender, plays well in the paint, but he also has height. And that might really be a necessity for the NBA for them to have. He would be a great backup player for Trae Young, who has been out on some injuries. A lot of people think they might pick Alex Starr, Isaiah Collier, but here's another name that's been thrown around. He's a French player. I think he's about 7 feet tall, Zaccharie. And I think the last name, some people have pronounced it Risacher. It's Risacher. Risacher. I've heard it pronounced two different ways. He is from France. Just like Dominique Wilkins, people forget that NBA human highlight Dominique Wilkins, a military son, was born to Gertrude and John in France. And so who knows? He might be swayed that way. We do know that they have flown to watch Zaccharie play the game, Zachariah play the game. We don't know what that might look like. But here's the deal. There is no doubt that the NBA has suffered dearly with this quote unquote global plan that they have. It's been ineffective in terms of trying to secure a fan base. Most of these players, just like Wemby, have zero collegiate and zero high school playing. So as a result, if you don't have a K through 12 following and you don't have a following on the collegiate level, notwithstanding the problems we're having with the transfer portal, but you ultimately need some type of fan base to secure the game. That's not to say that once they get into the NBA that they're not able to do that. We do know that Wemby had some successes. At one point, he had the fourth leading selling jersey. That number has since declined. But wherein we are making these attempts to pull players from around the world to create a global game, it has failed in terms of viewership. So when we look at what's happening with the upcoming class, one of the weakest ever, we do have Reed Shepherd, we have Cody Williams, we have Robert Dillingham. Now, Robert is a Kentucky baller, and so there have been conversations with regard to where he might come in the pick. Somebody and some of us looking at him to go to Utah. Others are stating he might end up in Houston. We don't know that. But there is some buzz around another unknown baller who is a low-level baller, Mataz Bozelis, and he raises a lot of concerns for different reasons. Some people see him going to San Antonio. Others see him going to Detroit. Well, what might be the problem with Mataz going to Detroit is that His agent is from the Tillum family. The Tillum family are chairmen of the Detroit Pistons. So what are we doing, NBA Players Association and the league as a whole, with regard to what might be a new trend with agent owners? And what might that do in terms of ensuring that these players have the best type of representation, avoiding conflicts of interest, and where, if any at all, there might be some ground rules that need to come forth in collective bargaining to protect the interests of the athletes, but also the integrity of the game, right? And so wherein you have agents who have part ownership or their fathers of owners or teams trying to negotiate with the same team, what does that do in terms of ensuring the fairness, fundamental fairness for the players? So that's what we have there. If he ends up at San Antonio, well, that's different. There's been some buzz whether he might end up at San Antonio. The Washington Wizards have also expressed an interest in Alex Starr. What does that look like for him? He definitely has been and once was a number one draft pick contender. Will he still maintain that rank? He should. But there are whispers that Zaccharie may very well end up with the Atlanta Hawks. I think that would be a great mistake to bring a player from France to Atlanta in an effort to undermine what most people want to happen. We need, if we are going to do this number one, picks, to ensure that they start going to U.S. players. I paused on that. The last 2 to 3 players have not necessarily represented the United States, Wemby being one of them. San Antonio did horrible, to say the least, in my eyes. I mean, did Wemby play the best game he could play? There's no doubt he did that. But what did that do for San Antonio in terms of their overall standing? And so, some other ballers who's are the safe new face card. I call them the safe card, but they're really the face cards of the NBA. Nikola Topic, Dalton Knecht, and Tristan da Silva. Now, Tristan da Silva is expected to go to the Los Angeles Lakers. Don't know if that's going to happen. But here's the deal with these new face cards. You don't recognize these ballers, do you? Nope, most of us don't. Most of us don't. And ideally, it's because a lot of them are being pulled from around the leagues, including G developments. So they're going to Europe and Spain, which is part of Europe. But I separated Spain and Portugal for the sole purpose of stating they're trying to pull in Latin ballers. Okay. But wherein you're doing that, you have a problem. And there is only one solution. You need to start going back to the days in which we pulled in black top ballers. People from urban corridors, middle and rural America, urban corridors, to represent the interests of the game. You can't have a conversation about the NBA draft and who they're bringing into the game without having a conversation about the impact of global sports. There is indeed a need to globalize basketball. We've been doing that for 20, 30 years. But while we're doing that, there's also become a decrease in the number of Black or African American players. And wherein those who identify as Black, some of them and many of them are biracial. We're seeing that, even with the Boston Celtics run for the finals. It's a lot of conversation about the biracial basketball players and the direction that the NBA is going. There's clearly now a 15% decline in the number of Black players in the NBA. That's up 3%. And the numbers are going to continue to grow. We're eventually going to be doing exactly what Major League Baseball did. And that was say, we're giving you Black players, not just from the United States. And eventually it became all Black players, none of whom basically are from the United States. They're representing the Dominican Republic and other countries. Is it enough for us to say that we have Black players and not African American players? Major League Baseball is at 6.2%. Those numbers we have not seen those numbers, respectfully, since 1955. I mean, shoot yourself for that. Literally, shoot yourself in the foot for that. How are we going backwards in terms of demographics? And why are we doing that? Why is there no longer an appreciation for Black athletes from the United States. What's really happening here? And I've been saying this forever, even particularly as we continue to cast and to shoot our footage for the Allen Iverson Way, documentary, The Wrong Ball, the Allen Iverson Way. We're still in production. And a conversation is ensuing around that, particularly as it pertains to the diversification of the game, the globalization of the game, but not at the expense of losing local players. And when we think of that, we think of what has happened. And again, I reiterate the same thing. From 1996 to now, there's truly been a push to ensure that we never, ever have another Allen Iverson, a poor black kid from urban America who wanted to do it his way, right? There's been a price to pay with that, too, in the globalization of the game. The new face cards, white, biracial, light-skinned, suburban, and in some regards, even foreign players. But it was Allen Iverson who helped to globalize the game. And the likes of Michael Jordan, too. Tar Heels, blacktop ballers, right? When it's broke, you try to fix it, but was it broke? Some people may have been shattered, offended by their blackness, if you will, including that of the culture. But Adam Silver's commissioner, your approach is not working. You must balance what the former commissioner David Stern was doing. I mean, just look at some of the contenders for the NBA draft class of 2024. I would suspect that at least 70% of them are not known players. And respectfully, almost if some people rely on some reports and what some of the executives wanted to do, we probably would have had less than a 20% representation by African American players. There's something to be said about that, don't you think? And you're underscoring it too. You're going to Europe and foreign countries. You're bringing these ballers in. And I get it. You guys want to look at what the Joker did with Denver and what Luka is doing with Curry. Okay, with Curry Irving. Let's not forget him. With Dallas Mavs. And then the answer becomes, we can do it with white athletes. Can you? This particular Dallas Mavericks, Boston Celtics finals have had some of the lowest ratings. And we saw the same thing with Denver. And you guys know this to be true. That's one of the reasons why you're trying to bring back the NBA on NBC. And I want to give myself a pat on the back for that, because over the last year, I've been also speaking about the numbers, but not just simply through the lens of money and media rights, but also through the lens of you're not reaching the American households. Many families are having financial difficulties, trying to follow you guys on the NBA app, cable, streaming, right? And a lot of households are paying upwards of almost $300 per month for this new setup of these athletic sports passes that are now being available to give them access, but they have to pay for it. $7.99 per month, plus the cost of cable, an additional $10.99, $3.99, plus the apps. When you start adding that up, it's almost $300 per month to simply enjoy cable television. So yeah, you go back to the NBA on NBC. That opens that up for a lot of families. It also allows for us, many of us Americans who were not able to afford cable, and since 2020 had the advantages of the American Connectivities Program that helped offset the cost of families being able to enjoy basic television, right? So we see you did that. Congratulations. That's a good look. But you also are attempting to ensure this global market has reached to by partnering with the likes of Amazon in an effort to make sure that those subscriptions are available through Prime. We see that too, and their ability to reach these different countries. But here's the deal. You've been doing that for a minute, just not under the same type of packaging, right? Or through Amazon. They've had the opportunity to watch the NBA. They're not watching global sports. I mean, let's stop the nonsense. We have the data, the research. We've been doing that. You're not breaking in. The barriers are not being broken. Yeah, you can show us a few things when Hennessy, does what they're doing in Taiwan and a couple of other things being done in London. But overall, you're just not getting that reach with the global market. They're not having the same sellout games that we have here. They don't have the arenas where they're coming in. Those are soccer, or what they call football there, but they're soccer territory. And I get it. You think that you can break in. Why not keep trying, but not at the expense of our players? I mean, we're even starting to question the answer and whether or not Joker, Luca, and others have really been able to dominate the sports like you guys say they have. Yeah, we know Allen Iverson has said, he loves how the Luca plays his game. Yeah, we see that. But who's going to win the NBA Finals tonight? Boston, right? I mean, we look at what Luca has done. I mean, make no mistake about it. He's done very well with the help of the likes of a Kyrie Irving and company. What you are attempting to do is have white athletes, even if they're foreigners, try to come in and dominate the NBA. It's not working. Even when they win it, even when Joker and Denver won it, you had the lowest ratings in NBA history of the finals. That's a problem. What's your answer? Go back to bringing in blacktop ballers. Go back to bringing in the people who had a fan base here, K through 12, born, fed, and bred. Go back to those playing in NC2A games, D1, D2. Go back to that. It worked. The highest ranking viewership was when those athletes were on the dance floor. No matter what you guys keep trying to do, Commissioner, and I know you troll me, it's all good. But no matter what, at the end of the day, it was Black athletes from urban corridors and the likes of the Larry Birds and the McHales, right? And the Dohertys too. Those kind of players, born, fed, and bred Americans, K through 12, collegiate. Now let's talk about the impact of what the transfer portal has done to you guys. The fact that you could play 1 year like Bronny, and then have the opportunity to enter the draft. Okay. We don't even see him in the pick, at least not what we've done. We don't have him here. Let him go back and play at least 2 more years. There might be some who've put him in here, but definitely not for the teams people thought to play side by side with his dad. And alternatively, on other teams either. I'm going to tell you, nepotism at its worst if he comes in the first round. And rumor has it, he's probably going to go back in and play. I think he should, if he wanted to. I really think he needs to sit down. I'm concerned about you, Bronny. I really am. We've been praying for you. We really have. I mean, if it's something you really want, fine. But it's matters of the heart that count and matter, right? I mean, we don't want another situation like a Lewis or a Hank Gathers. I mean, we just don't. But if that's your love for the game and you're willing to risk it all, we get it. I respectfully say at 5 points per game and less than 25 games with USC, you should never have made it to the 78 for the combine. You can't have that conversation outside of, the NBA draft 2024. And it's funny because we look at a lot of the players who are showing up that were not part of the combine either. And now they have found their way into the NBA draft. And you guys are expecting viewership. You're expecting for people to pay tickets to go to the game. Not only is viewership down, but also, when you think about it, so are ticket sales and game attendance. All right? So let's talk about some other issues surrounding the NBA draft. I gave you a summary. Let's talk about Mataz B. The Tillum family are owners and chairmen of the Detroit Pistons, but they have a son who is also a sports agent now. And there's great concern about what might be headed in the way of sports in America, the role of agent owners, and what might that look like to protect the integrity of the sport, wherein you can own a team and then start pulling in your own players and then have family members who you know have some type of interest in the game and in ownership too, now negotiate for these players. A father and son duel? Is it really going to protect the integrity of the game? Or do we need to go back to collective bargaining to ensure the integrity of the game and the profession as a whole? You talk about a cardinal sin of betting against a player, commissioner. And as we looked at what happened with Dante Porter with allegations of sports betting. But what do you do respectfully when the owners are now the agents of their own players? I mean, what might that look like in terms of driving down the rookie cap, in terms of player salaries? Okay. The cap now is 10 million. When we first implemented or enacted the rookie cap is 1996, it was 3 million. Now we're at 10 over 30 years. That's not good either. But are we going to start driving down the value of players? So when you start bringing in these lowballer unknowns from around the world, and then you say we're going to now represent them as agent owners, what are we doing for the cost of the game too? Now we know teams like Charlotte Hornets valuations was about $3 billion like boy, 76ers $3 billion like boy, but are those numbers accurate? Or are we literally driving up the cost or the valuations to keep a lot of blacks who are interested in owning the teams out? And all of that is connected when we start trying to control who the athletes are too, and how we're negotiating them, and whether we're lowballing them. You can't have a conversation about the NBA draft without talking about the powers and super agents, even to include, Rich Paul. I know, when we look at the history, the research shows us that the likes of David Falk had about 40 of the best players in the history of the game. That was a problem then also, but it's still a problem now. Conflicts of interest too. Should the NBA Players Association give consideration to actually limiting, if you will, the number of athletes that each agent can represent? And here's the other question, which we need an answer. Should there be a program in place wherein your rookies don't require an agent at all because they're capped? So there's really no room for negotiation, if as it were. This is what we're paying you, and that's that. You don't need an agent for that. They shouldn't have to give away 4% under the guidelines that are in place because there's caps and it's more regulated. What the top 30 are going to receive first round, first 1 through 30, right? You cannot have these conversations about the NBA draft without having those conversations too. So, with that being said, let me spend the latter part of this show talking about the weakness of this class. I've spoken with several executives and other scouts as well, notwithstanding, Castle from UConn, representing that three-peat, and Alex Starr and Isaiah Collier. Reed Shepard, Cody Williams, Robert Dillingham. The rest of this class is weak, respectfully. And even with all due respect, these names that I've just given, notwithstanding Stephon, and Alex Starr, they don't have that talent. when you look at some of the other classes. I mean, we dare not even try to compare it to 1996, right? We won't do that. But even when you look at 2004 and 2014 class, I mean, this is weak. What is happening to that? And so what we're looking at when we think about that is not simply the fact that they don't have the urban ballers, the defensive players, but legacy players too. And wherein you're not a legacy player, it's nepotism also. Owners picking players that they want from different parts of the world, to include France. You know, what did Wemby really do for San Antonio or for the game as a whole? I mean, aside from people, enjoying him as a foreign player, I mean, make no mistake, he had the stats, the rebounds. I mean, we get that. But what did it did overall for the game? It's amazing. I mean, he's like a Caitlin Clark right now when you compare the two. You're bringing them in. You think they're going to bring in the crowds. They're going to bring in the numbers. People are going to be going out their way to buy jerseys and, buy tickets to see the game. And ultimately, what does it do in the end for the team and for their standings in the league? So if it has to be a little more than simply about, and I know this sounds funny or contradictory. We know sports is more than a game. It's a business, and the business of sports is politics too. So we understand it through that lens. But is it really business when you're losing viewership? Is it really business when the interest is lost as well? So it's beyond losing viewers. It's people who no longer are interested even in the finals. And how and why is that happening? And what might we do to fix it? Transfer portal. Again, I say this, you can't have this conversation about the draft without talking about the transfer portal, about talking about whether we now need to create some type of environment where they may have to play a minimum of maybe 2 years, maybe before they can transfer, right? Or maybe a mandatory 2 years before they can enter the draft. I don't know. We know that when Kobe came in out of high school, just like when Dawkins did it, they were, and Moses, we started creating new requirements. So what might those requirements be? If you're going to do the transfer portal, you must commit to at least 2 years before you can enter the portal to go to another team, build a fan base, because that, in essence, supports the game too, the NBA. We know that when we look at the numbers overall, you're talking about 1.4 million high school basketball players, male and female. By the time you break those down to D1s, freshmen, you're looking at about 14,500. We know that number is even smaller by the senior year, and 17,005, and we know the number is about 4,500 by the time they're seniors. And of that core group, you're only going to pull only 30 for the first round. We get that. And so we know that the other players might feel like, well, we're not guaranteed a slot, but at least we want to work toward the opportunity to get exposure. What might that exposure look like in terms of an international globalization of the game, right? But wherein we think about it through the lens of the NBA only, right? And trying to build a fan base. How do we now look at what we might do in terms of collective bargaining for the draft itself? What might the rule be? The first rule change we know came in under Kobe, and that rule change was you have to be now 19, because that was really as a result of the Kobe Bryant era. And then we must ensure that they have successfully completed at least one draft year in college. Okay? Bottom line, go to 1 year of college since the last draft. Whether you pass or not may be a different subject matter for the purposes of this show, but nevertheless, are we at the stage where we may have to go back and start negotiating those issues again? And I think we do. I'm speaking like we're in a roundtable meeting, but it is what it is, right? So that's basically what we need to do. And I think when you look at this class, it's week. You can't give a lot of even attention to it, not even 30 minutes for a podcast. That's how weak it is. None of them are going to really do much of anything to change the game. I like Stephon almost. We kind of love Stephon Castle. He started as a 3-star, now he's a 5-star, coming off a squad that's three-peat. Alex Starr, Isaiah Collier. The rest of them, like I said, they gave it their best. Shepard, Williams, and Dillingham. The rest are not even, conversational pieces, right? Okay, so starting for my season 2, I will be live. You'll see me in person. I think I've done enough to build my brand in this space. Rebuild it. Wait till you see who I am. Yeah, I understand that. I'm having fun with it. We did 30 shows, all audio. We did 32 in total. The diversity of sports, what I've always done before, and continuing to write the articles. We'll be back for season 2. Season 2, Field to Rim podcast will be live. Yeah, not Memorex. We'll be live. You'll see us in person. We're going to be having a guest lineup too. We're also going to be on the road, as they say, taking it on the town. We will be including some of the coverage that I'll have for The Wrong Ball, the Allen Iverson Way documentary. We're going to be using most of the summer to finish that up. And we look forward to you all joining us and participating with us on this level. Thank you for joining me on Field to Rim podcast. Lisa Hampton, brought to you by Seltzer and Sports. LISA. Love is selflessly authentic. Hampton, having all money, power, talent, opportunities now, _ on Twitter. Thank you.